The darkest, most disgusting secrets you've never heard. I destroyed my father's marriage because he cheated on my mother. When I was 4 years old, my father and my mother divorced because he cheated on her. They had a very difficult divorce with a lot of fights. Finally, the divorce was settled, and my mother and father were able to move on separately. My father married his mistress, who I will call Maria to respect her privacy. My father was very happy with her, and my sister and I had a stepbrother and 2 stepsisters with whom we got along very well. 2 years passed and Maria began to act differently, as did my father. My sister and I often couldn't visit our father because he had to work, when he really had nothing to do. When my sister and I were there, we were often not allowed to eat at the table, which I, as a 7-year-old, did not understand. Eventually, my father began to become more distant. He no longer wished me happy birthday, and he missed many important events in my childhood, such as learning to ride a bike or playing in school. When I was 9 years old, my sister and I could only visit them 4 days a month, and we had to sleep in separate rooms. I vividly remember that during one weekend we were there, I accidentally broke a glass and Maria was furious. She sent me upstairs and made me take off my socks, which at 9 years old seemed really strange to me. Then she showed me a piece of glass she had in her hand, and said this is what I deserved for my clumsiness. He pushed the shard of glass into the sole of my foot. Obviously, I screamed and cried and tried to pull my leg out of his grip. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my father's hand. He was helping Maria do this and I don't remember what happened next. Maria also fought with my sister a lot, and once pulled her by the hair all the way to the basement. After these 2 traumatic occasions and after much verbal abuse, we decided to break off all contact and tell our mother what had happened. We hadn't told her before because, well, he was our father. My mother knew this was serious abuse, but she was too afraid to alert the police, as my father had threatened her before. 5 years later, I was 14 years old, and a freshman in the same school my sisters attended. Once I saw them, all the memories started to come flooding back. My 2 stepsisters had become big bullies, and a lot of people hated them. A couple of friends and I decided to retaliate, and hide 2 small bags of drugs in their backpacks. Apparently, this had caused a big fight in their house, and my father and Maria decided to divorce after this. Maria got into serious financial trouble and my father became an alcoholic. 2 weeks ago he was arrested for assault. Maria has allegedly become a woman who sold her body at night, and my step-siblings have been taken into protective custody. This has all been my fault. It was my idea to put those drugs in their backpacks, even though they didn't do anything to me. I ruined my step-siblings' lives, and sent my stepmother and father on a downward spiral into ruin. Yet, in some sick way, I feel no remorse. After all of Mary's verbal abuse, my sister has been dealing with a severe eating disorder, and has been hospitalized twice. And I once tried to take my own life, because of Maria's conservative Christian sermons to me. Now my sister and I are doing better, although we still have trauma. We thought about filing a lawsuit, but because of our age during the incidents, legal advisors advised us to just move on with our lives. Anyway, I did something that caused horrible things, but I don't feel any remorse. Am I a psychopath? I scammed men who were attracted to underage girls and I feel pretty good about it. I'm not kidding, and that's my whole secret. I take $15 to $30 from each person by saying I'm a 15-year-old girl. Then I usually report them to the police and track IPs. It feels good to see scumbags like that lose money trying to feed their weird perversion. In fact, I just saved over $500 doing it, and since I'm 14, that's a lot of money for me. I was able to buy rings for my girlfriend and myself and also some jewelry for my friend. Should I stop or should I continue, and should there be any extra precautions I should take? The most money anyone has ever paid me for was $150. People are really desperate. I started a new job. I don't do anything and I love it. I recently started a new job as a security guard at a children's hospital on the west coast of the country. I was a little hesitant because at $45,000 a year, I wondered what would be tedious about this job. As a long-time cook, I hardly ever made more than $16 an hour with a lot of experience. My day consists of sitting in a comfy chair at my on-call station, greeting guests, talking to nurses, sometimes going for a walk, and 80% of the time watching movies and playing games on my phone, which is totally accepted. In addition, I get a total of 1 hour of paid rest a day. I was raised with a strong mentality that you have to work hard, to see your fruits and not be lazy. Well, I'm being lazier than ever. I've watched at least one movie and a few TV shows a day during my shift. Initially, I felt guilt every day going home and feeling confused, but now it's normal. I'm making more money than ever and I couldn't be happier. I think about horses when I have sex or have an intimate moment with myself. I am a 26-year-old female and grew up on a farm with lots of animals, including horses. I have known how to ride most of my life and have owned several horses. Honestly, I started liking horses and riding early on because it rubbed me the wrong way when I rode. As I got older, I was even able to climax by making my horse run a couple of times. I want to start by saying that I would never touch a horse in this way, or try to have intercourse with one, for fear of hurting myself or the horse, but I find them very attractive. And it's not just their size. I've never touched one that way, but the idea of doing so is always there. Whenever I'm intimate with a man or myself, I think of these animals. I know it's kind of sick and gross, but I would never actually touch one that way, let alone try to put one inside me. It's just a fantasy I have. I used to relax in random people's houses when they were out. Years ago, when I lived in my previous city, I used to walk through neighborhoods that were not my own, and look for houses where the occupants were not to be found, to see if any entrances were unlocked. If I managed to get in through a door or window, I would usually enter his house and just relax on his couch. Sometimes I would watch their TV and eat their food. Also, most people's dogs are dumb when it comes to strangers entering the house. I would just bring dog treats with me and most would think, oh, new human friend, so I would also chill with random people's pets. I never got caught for any of this. When I was young, I wanted to poison one of my uncles. When I was a 10-year-old kid, my uncle drank from the same cup every day. I didn't dislike him or anything like that, I just wanted to see if it would work. I put a good amount of peroxide in his cup. Then I mixed some random stuff I found in his room, hand sanitizer, isopropyl alcohol, and even shaving cream. I mixed it all together, and then left in hopes of hearing some kind of suffering coming from his room. He could obviously smell seeing all that stuff inside his cup, and little old me didn't think anything of it. He threw that concoction down the drain, and never thought anything bad or asked any questions. He would never hurt anyone. Now he was a kid exploring things he had just learned. I promise I'm not crazy, I was just dangerously curious. I once pushed an old lady down the stairs, because she noticed that my gang friends and I were doing something wrong. When I was young and dumb, I would go out every day with friends to do stupid things like ringing doorbells of houses and running away, breaking things that were not ours, disturbing the peace, and so on. It was in December 2017, when we went out in the neighborhood to run around different places, knock on doors of houses or do some other nonsense, which basically made people go crazy. One of my friends decided to start throwing bricks at a lamppost for fun, and we thought everything was fine, because it was dark and no one was on the street. After we finished, we went to get something to drink and went into an apartment to get warm, because it was a very cold and snowy winter. 10 minutes later, we noticed a lady 2 floors above us talking to someone on the phone, about some thugs running around and breaking things. We got scared that she might have seen us, and maybe even recorded all the action. We went upstairs to make sure she wasn't talking about us, and it turned out she was on the phone with her son. When she saw us coming up, she quickly said to her son, "Come on, go upstairs faster, they are here." We were terrified and didn't know what to do. The lady was in her 60s and 70s, so we didn't want to do anything that could hurt her, but before we could think of anything, I rammed her and she fell down the stairs screaming. We ran down and out of the building. As we started running, I looked back to where she was and it looked to me like she was still moving, so we ran away. I don't know where she is today, and I hope she is alive and well. I really feel very guilty to this day, because she must have been hurt for sure. I learned from my mistakes and now I have better friends. I am almost 18 years old and I am surrounded by good people. I know how to do good and I am a different person, but I will not forgive myself for hurting an old lady. I left a girl because she had a child. I dated a girl for 5 or 6 weeks. At first it was casual, but it got more serious. She told me that we needed to talk about our relationship. She told me she had a daughter, but she hadn't said anything about it before because she doesn't like to expose her to men, unless she knows the guy is someone good. She said she protects her daughter from all that so she doesn't get the wrong idea, and she might think her mom is dating all these guys. She said she thinks we were getting serious and she saw a future for us, and she thought it was the right time for me to meet her daughter. I dumped her immediately. I don't like kids, I don't have or want kids, and I sure as hell don't want to play daddy to another guy's kid. I can understand not wanting all the guys she dates to meet her daughter, but I feel like this is information you should disclose directly. She said it was my fault for not asking her if she had kids, but this was her fault. She was wrong to withhold that kind of information. I accidentally found out that my employer was closing his business, so I purposely waited to get severance pay. In my country this is called redundancy, but basically it is a scenario where the owner of the company you work for reduces the number of employees in case a certain job is no longer needed, and subsequently those left out are made redundant. Obviously, your employer must pay you if you are laid off. In my previous job, I worked for 10 years as a manager in an electronics store. I loved my job, my colleagues were great and I really appreciated my customers. I never liked my boss, as he was the most unprofessional and rude person I have ever met. He was rude and ignorant to everyone and always thought he was right, no matter how much evidence to the contrary. After several years of putting up with his bullying and emotional abuse, I had had enough. I went into a complete depression, feeling useless and worthless. I started looking for better jobs, as did my colleagues at the time. They knew our boss was the problem. One day, one of my coworkers called me out of the blue, and asked me if I knew anything about a layoff. I had no idea what he was talking about. You see, we had an iPod connected to our speaker system. However, it was synced to our employer's personal iPhone. All calls, WhatsApp messages and text messages also went through the iPad. While one of the staff guys was changing the music on the iPod, a text notification came in that came from our boss's accountant. The message read, "Not sure regarding legal redundancy. My employer had canceled a concession in a retail department the year before, maybe something similar was going on. I really had no idea, but this seemed plausible. Leaving major redundancy issues so late would be typical of him, as he was an idiot. Now I was curious about all this. I knew I couldn't search through previous messages on the iPod, unless my employee had already read the messages. I waited a few days until being alone, getting paid one night, I went to check it. There was a thread of messages from my employer to his accountant about winding up the business. I was shocked and felt bad reading someone else's messages, but I couldn't help myself. Was he talking about his previous business? No details were attached other than investigating the layoff and claiming settlement. He did not specify any personnel or store locations or time periods. I did not share this information with my colleagues, but then I began to observe my employer's behavior. He was nervous. He stopped coming to work and was acting weirder than usual. I resisted the temptation to quit this job, turned down a job offer, and canceled a vacation I had planned. 3 weeks later, I received an email about a staff meeting, which was related to a financial realignment of the company. I knew this meant the company was in trouble. I still feel deserving of an Oscar for my incredible performance upon hearing this news for the first time. So before it was too late, I got my severance pay, which came 4 months late. It was a sizable and welcome sum, as I was saving up to buy a house. Of course, my former employer tried to fight me on the amount, and tried to keep almost €2,000 of my severance pay. But when I told his accountant that I was going to take him to the court of claims, suddenly my calculations were correct. So yes, this is my little confession and I have no regrets. To hell with this employer, he was a bastard and everything he did to me has backfired on him.